If you or someone you know is struggling with alcoholism or addiction, do not hesitate to reach out for help. You can find numerous free resources on our website, thebeginagainpodcast.com, and there are tons of resources and support networks available online, in person, or just a phone call away. You don't have to face this challenge alone. Welcome to the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes. On the Begin Again podcast, we delve into the inspiring journeys of individuals who have overcome alcoholism and addiction and emerged as true trailblazers in entrepreneurship, business, sports, and beyond. Through authentic, uplifting, and profound conversations with our guests, we aim to shatter the stigma surrounding addiction and demonstrate that recovery can be a catalyst for remarkable success, strength, and resilience. We firmly believe that by listening to these accounts, you will be empowered to unlock your own potential, instigate positive change in your life, and contribute to the creation of a better world. So, get ready to be inspired and embark on your own personal journey of growth with the Begin Again podcast. Hello, everyone. This is the Begin Again podcast. I'm your host, Gary Menkes, and today it is my pleasure to bring on Luke Worsfold. Did I pronounce that right, Luke?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Luke has got his own podcast, which he's going to tell us all about, and he's got an amazing story, and I'm super grateful that you're here. And like I said off camera, it's meeting people like you through this podcasting has been such an added bonus for me.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here, Gary. Thanks very much for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, no, appreciate it. So where'd you grow up? Where are you from? And let's hear some of your story.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So I grew up in the UK, just about an hour outside London in a seaside town called Southend, as we call it, sunny Southend, although it's not always sunny over here in the UK. And a bit of my story in terms of growing up. So I grew up with my mum and my dad. And my mum, she was an alcoholic and she drank. And that was challenging between her and my relationship with my dad. And then when I got to the age of 10, my parents split up. And then a little while later, my mum, she passed away from drinking because she was drinking so much and doing drugs. And as I grew up, along the way between like 0 and 10, I did experience some times with my mum when she was drinking and times when I have to carry her home drunk. And it was challenging as a young kid not to really understand what alcohol was, but just to know my mum had this problem and that she may die from it. And it was this thing called alcohol, but as like an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid, I never understood what that meant. But one thing I did understand is that when she passed away, that almost killed me. At the funeral, I actually missed going to the wake because I was so ill, like my physical body shut down as I went to the funeral and as I went to the wake. And I was literally, just so drained of just energy as a result of that experience. And I mean, as a 10-year-old kid, subconsciously, I did just rip out anything that connected my head to my heart. I just suppressed everything, numbed everything down. So I just didn't understand what grief was or how to cope with grief. And the challenging thing was, Gary, is that then as I grew up from, starting puberty in my adolescent years, I was around my 2 brothers who were 4 and 5 years older than me. And we had all just experienced this big loss in our life from mum. And none of us really know how to deal with it. So we just, as boys normally do, fight and beat each other up. And that was just shrugged off as boys will be boys. It's okay for them to beat each other up and have a fight. That's not a problem. But that just further reinforced for me that there wasn't room for emotions. If I showed emotions or any kind of quote unquote weakness, I was then, beaten up and had a fight and, called names by my brothers and sort of teased. And, that had a negative impact in me by just causing me to push my emotions down further and further and further, just sort of never to be found again. And the challenge is when someone at such an early age, such as myself, just pushing my emotions down more and more and more, when I started to go to school and discovered, having my first drink, smoking my first cigarette, smoking my first joint, getting introduced to cocaine at an early age, that really started to kind of subconsciously play around in my mind like, oh, I'm feeling all these emotions and stress on one side of life. And I'm then using these drugs, which are kind of numbing them and suppressing them. And in my mind, without realizing it, it kind of created this pattern that a lot of people experience, which is in order to regulate or numb my emotions, I was then drinking and using drugs. And when I left school, Gary, I went on and did a bit of traveling, but then I landed and started my own company. And running my own business in my early 20s was really, really stressful. Growing a team, started to employ staff and scale things. And, as a lot of people who are entrepreneurs have experienced, we go out for parties to celebrate winning that big client. We go out, have a few drinks that may lead to a few lines of coke, and we're just having a bit of fun and celebrating. But for me, that just compounded over time, and it just spiraled more and more and more. And it got to the point for me where I ended up just drinking and using drugs, and I ended up losing the whole business because I was spending thousands of pounds I just didn't have on drink and drugs and on partying. And I was then at my rock bottom moment, and that's when I kind of went on to find a solution. But that was really the rock bottom point for me, and a bit about how I grew up.
I can relate to so much you had just said. I didn't have the loss I had when you were 10 years old, correct? Right, Luke, when your mom? Yeah. I mean, that's just difficult to say the very least, but I can relate to, suppressing everything down, learning how to cope, developing defense mechanisms. I called mine a chip on my shoulder. I had a very active dad. He never got help. I mean, it just wasn't his path, I guess, but I had a very active dad. I saw things that, normal 8, 9, 10-year-olds are not supposed to be seeing and watching. I developed this chip on my shoulder. And I also developed, which I didn't realize till I got sober, this just horrific fear. I was always afraid of, there was a while I was afraid that he wasn't going to make it home. As a young kid, I'd just sit on the front kitchen and look out the window, wondering if he's going to make it home. And, it's funny, as I graduated a little older and started drinking and drugging, I thought I wasn't afraid of anything, but it was in sobriety that I realized that I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of, like I said, my dad coming home. I was afraid of what would happen if he did come home. I was afraid of people knowing what was going on inside my house. I was afraid of a lot of things. I could put fear on almost anything. But again, I learned this in sobriety very, very late in life. I thought I was Superman, and I wasn't afraid of anything. I'd like to hear about, you talked about your bottom, and are you able to put your finger on? Do you know what happened? Like, you got that bottom. What turned where you sought help to change your life?
Yeah. So for me, I remember it clearly, as I was running my business, I lived in a penthouse flat, and my business partner had a Mercedes, and we'd drive around in the Mercedes, and all of that went, and I lost all of that, and I had to move into a house share. And I was living in a house share, and I was going over to the local park to kind of, smoke joints and just use drugs and, cope with life at the time after losing my business. And a lot of clients who had taken their kind of money and just blowing it or spent it on drugs or whatever were kind of calling me. I was getting loads of phone calls every day for people just asking me what was going on, what was happening. I was just sitting on the park bench every day, just ashamed, just with the weight of the world on my shoulders. And every day I would just go on this mission to try and borrow money off people and get someone to lend me an extra 10 or 20 quid to go and, pick up some drugs or drink, or just kind of keep the feelings numbed and suppressed. Mm-hmm. And it was a time when I was ringing through and I exhausted pretty much every contact I could think of. And this particular day, Gary, I felt like I only had one number left. And this person in my phone was a business mentor of mine, and someone who had kind of been through the journey themselves, and was like the last person I wanted to call, but I knew they'd have money because he ran a successful business. And I called him, and I just pressed ring, and I tried to bullshit my way through the call, and he could see right through it, and he just cut me off. And it was a sentence that would just change my life forever. And he said, "Luke, you're a crackhead." And it was in that moment that he just shattered just all that denial. And I realized, fuck, although I've never done crack, I was still an addict, just like my mum, heading towards death, just, using drugs day in, day out. And it was really, really challenging. In that moment, I was just like, sat there on that park bench for hours after, just thinking about my life. Do I want to die of addiction? Do I want to be just like her? I couldn't see a way out. I didn't understand. I couldn't, if you'd have told me 5 years later I'll be a counselor running a successful company, I would have been like, that's bullshit. I'm just going to be using drugs. So in that moment, I really didn't know what I was going to do, but I just decided I'm not going to die like this. I'm going to pick myself up, and I'm going to become my best self. And I didn't really know what that best self even was. And it's still an aspiration even now, we never complete. but I wanted to become better than I was on that day. And that's when I really realized, after that phone call from my friend, that I needed to sort my life out. And that's when I booked in to see a therapist. I just Googled around and found a therapist and went back week after week and untangled that mess of my emotions, went through my childhood and spent years. I'm still in therapy now, 7 years later, and I spent years untangling that mess of my emotions and figuring out all the different pieces of the puzzle to sort of put myself back together and build the man I am today. So that rock bottom moment was just pivotal for me, that my friend said that one comment.
It's amazing, right? Like I can relate to that as well. Like I remember I was in a rehab. It was the first time, and I thought my life was over. And I was like, look what you did. Look where you are now, and I went to my first AA meeting there. And I can remember as clear as day, right this second, when I said, I'm Gary and I'm an alcoholic. And that was kind of your moment, your friend. And I can't help to think there's a little higher power intervention there, that you had one number left, right? And you kind of knew that this guy's been through a journey, and the last guy you wanted to call, but you dialed him, and lo and behold, you get that sentence, as you said, and it immediately shatters what you do know, but you hear it, right? You hear it and you face it. It sounds like you faced it. And what an amazing moment in your life, where I've been called names to, or not called names, I shouldn't, because that's not what he was doing, but I've been called things when I was in the middle of my chaos. And like he said, it would make the shame even more and more, but it still kept going, but you had that moment, and it changed for you. It seems like stepping back almost on a snap of a finger. Maybe you didn't know it at that second, but looking back, that's like your moment, it sounds like. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. That was the moment. And it wasn't necessarily, all, sort of amazing from there. But I think that was the moment I decided that I didn't want to be like this. I decided things were going to change. And it did take time in therapy, probably about a year of like relapses, and I'd do well for a few months and I'd relapse again. And then I'd kind of do well for a bit, and then something else would happen. Another like left field moment would happen and I'd relapse again. And over time, eventually the last time was just my last time. But it definitely, like that on that park bench was the decision. And then it just, through therapy, and I always stayed in therapy, just kept working on things over and over and over again and integrating the change into my life. I had to eventually answer all those phone calls, and I paid people back where I could, or did the marketing for them or the website for them. And I cleaned up that whole mess of shit that I left behind me the best I could. And definitely, some people still aren't happy about it, or maybe they are. I don't know. It's many years now, but I did my best to make amends. I made a direct amends where I could, but I also made a living amends in terms of I don't treat people like that anymore. So I think that's the important thing. I made a direct amends where I could to help people, and a living amends by not behaving in that way in the here and now.
Yeah, the living amends is such such an amazing concept or amazing thing, right? I too, I have people where I'm not sure if, I did try to make amends, or I did make the direct amends, but I'm not sure how they feel. But the living amends, right, is living that life now, and not being the person that I was. And I had to chuckle a little bit because you mentioned, answering the phone. Like, I'm going to be 49 years old in a couple of weeks, and honest to God, when that phone rings right now, I have an instant feel of gratitude inside, because for years and years and years in the chaos and even in sobriety, I was unable to answer the phone, and I was just terrified every time that phone rang. And today, when the phone rings, I feel gratitude because I can just answer it right on the first ring. And, it's one of those subtle, small little gifts that I've been given in sobriety, but it's so important, and because, like I said, living a life where you're not able to even answer the phone because you don't know what happened the night before, you don't know who it is, you don't know what you owe, you don't know what you did, is a tough way to live. And like I said today, we don't have to live that way, which is a beautiful thing. Yeah. What year are we talking? What year were you on that park bench when you made that call?
Yeah, so it was around 2015, 2016. And so this is going to be roughly my 7th year of recovery. I don't necessarily count the dates super structured, but I know 2016 was when I first started therapy. And yeah, that was the rough date. So yeah, about, sort of 7 years ago, was the last sort of time.
So I was in and out too for a while. Like my first AA meeting was in that rehab, and that was 2002. And my sobriety date is May 13th, 2006. So I had 4 years of continuing the fight, in and out. And it was ugly. I had bouts of sobriety. But I don't think I ever put 90 days together, not even after that rehab. And I was in and out for 4 years. And, I had heard in the rooms that we were engaged in a battle every single day of our lives, and we didn't even know it. And I heard that fairly recently, last few years, that was so me. But tell our audience, if you would. So how do you keep your sobriety today? What's, I've been told, put my sobriety first, and I struggled with that for a little while. But now that I kind of found a higher power, that's kind of one and the same. That's for me. But I'm very active in meetings, and I'm very active in the community. What keeps you sober today? How do you work your program, if you will, if you work a program?
So for me, the sort of tools that really help me stay focused and stay on top of my game, I do think my work helps, because I work with clients all day, every day in addiction as a counsellor, and helping clients along that journey. It is an amazing sort of job I'm really fulfilled to do, and that I really, really enjoy. But it does remind me of what things could be like, where I'm meeting people at the beginning of the journey and helping them get their kind of drink and drug use under control. At the beginning, when I interact with a lot of people, I'm reminded of what could happen for me if I go back down that path. One's too many, 1,000 is never enough. If I go back that path, that's where I could end up. So that does hold me accountable to a certain extent, and it does give me a lot of purpose and mission and drive. Like I say, that higher power. I don't want people to die of addiction like mum did, like that. Yes, they will, and there's nothing I can do about that. That's just a fact of life. But I want to do my best to help people and educate them and teach them and guide them to not have that happen. So definitely the accountability of the work I do, definitely having that sense of a really big mission that I work on to help people. But in terms of the more tactical side of things, so I go to therapy. Therapy is something I still engage in. I'd like to do 10 years of therapy is my goal. I'm sort of 7 years in. And I want to do 10 years of therapy to kind of get that under my belt and see how I feel when I get there. And that's a really important space for me to really process my feelings, talk about what's going on, what challenges are happening, really just have that 1 hour a week to check in with myself and discuss what's going on and reflect on my life. So that's really, really important. Also journaling. I journal a lot and write down what's going on for me. I have my journal that I reflect on. I take space and time to journal out my feelings, to do brain dumps, to write about gratitude, to analyze any different behaviors that are happening in my life. So that's really, really important. I also do a lot of self-care and sort of inner child work at the moment in terms of reparenting and nurturing my inner child. So that would involve loving myself and giving myself a lot of love. So I'll tell you a quick story, Gary, to demonstrate the self-love part, because that's really important for me. But when I was young, I must have been about 6, 7 or 8 or 9 years old, I remember being at my mum's house, and I was looking around and scrummaging around the house to try and find some food to eat. I don't remember where she was. I think she was drunk, passed out somewhere. She just kind of is somewhere in the house in this memory. And I remember opening the fridge, and it just stunk. It just stunk like shit. So I just closed it straight away. And then I opened the freezer and I rummaged around, and I found this little microwave pizza that was about this big. In the UK, we have these microwave pizzas you can put in the microwave for 2 minutes, and they go bing, and they smell like dog food, and they're classed as food, and you can eat them. And I sat there as like a 8, 9-year-old kid just eating this little pizza that I just cooked for 2 minutes for my dinner. And that's something I remember as a little kid. Now, in terms of self-love, one of the important sort of love languages is acts of service and doing nice things for yourself. So when I moved into this flat in the past kind of couple of years, one thing I did is I went and bought one of those pizzas, those very same microwave 2-minute pizzas, and I also made myself a really nice wing of skate, fish and chips. I know I'm British. I did actually make fish and chips. A wing of skate with triple cooked chips, like the best Michelin star meal I could. I don't have any Michelin stars, but my idea of a Michelin star meal, and I put both of them together, that 2-minute microwave pizza and the lovely, beautiful wing of skate I just made myself. And I looked at them in front of me, Gary, and I was like, wow, this is self-love. Giving this to yourself, teaching my inner child that he's worth more than that little pizza, that he's worth more than that he deserves this meal that I labored over for hours. And I sat down and ate it with a smile on my face, safe in my lovely flat that I just got, that I earned myself. With my lovely special Gordon Ramsay pans, and I made it really special for myself. And that is just an example of self-love, of just really giving myself love. So I do a lot of things like that in my life. So that's really important, nurturing that inner child. I also enjoy meditation, is also important for me in terms of like static meditation, active meditation. I do a lot of bike riding and extreme sports and going on my bike. But they're some of the main kind of core things that hold me on track that would be in my program.
I love that story. But were you given that? Like, did you do that on your own? How did you find that amazing self-love? Like, how'd you come up with that? Were you taught that?
Yeah. So what I just kind of discovered it on the way from my own sort of journey of therapy. But one of the things that kind of coincided to create that was you have the 5 love languages, which is a really famous book in the UK and I think globally. And that's really, really important. Now, the love languages are ways you can give love and receive love. So they're gifts. So giving gifts, quality time, acts of service. Gifts, quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and words of affirmation. And they're the 5 love languages. And they're important ways to show and receive love. So in terms of my own inner child and doing inner child work, I kind of integrated the two. And this is one thing I take clients through in my programs, is how to actually do this tactically. So for example, one of the love languages was acts of service and gifts. So I brought myself the amazing Gordon Ramsay pans. That was a gift, an act of self-love to myself. And also in terms of, sort of acts of service, spending the time to make myself that meal, having the quality time to sit there and enjoy it, and give myself those versions of love. So read the book, The 5 Love Languages, that has a lot of it. And also re-communicating those positive messages to inner child that perhaps that inner child didn't get when it was a kid, like in my case.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So do you teach that? Is that part of your business when you're helping people today?
Yeah. So I take them through an 8-week program that helps them get their drink and drug use under control, that blends lots of psychological tools as well as the counseling as well. And that's one of the things we go over in the program, is how to actually love yourself, take care of yourself, nurture inner child, and reprogram some of that conditioning that you didn't get when you're a child. And I think that's really, really important, because if I have a low self-worth, then I'm going to be drinking and using drugs because I'm just a piece of shit and I don't deserve stuff. And that was a belief I had for many years. And I work hard to change that belief. Now I don't drink and use drugs, and I work in many ways to show myself love. And that's one thing I go through with clients all the time and teach them in our video programs and our one-to-one counseling programs, like every single day, day in, day out.
I love that. That's amazing. And, you're touching upon where I wanted to get to. I was just loving what you were telling me, that, the self-love too. I've never heard that. I'm gonna have to look into that book too when we're finished here. What happened? Where was the point in your life, Luke, where you're getting sober, you have that moment on the bench, right? You're struggling for a little bit, right? I think you're in and out. And what happened? Where were you when you said, I'm not only going to change my life, I don't want to, what happened to me happen to my mom. I also want to help people. And in fact, I'm going to make that my life's work and my business. Like how did that happen? Please share that.
Yeah. So I remember I was in therapy and I was working on myself. And I remember saying to my therapist, at the time I ran my web design and marketing company, the one that failed. I was trying to pick up the pieces and trying to get some of the clients and help people and still make a tiny bit of money to pay for therapy in my life and stuff. So I was kind of picking up the pieces of my life. And I remember sitting in therapy saying to my therapist, but if I just make a website so that someone can sell more cakes, they're just going to sell more cakes. Like, it doesn't give me any meaning. They're just selling more cakes. I didn't give a shit about cakes, really. I didn't give a shit about the website. I was just doing it to do it. And I was like, this doesn't fill me up. It doesn't get me out of bed in the morning. It doesn't really, light a fire under my arse and give me that sort of meaning and purpose. I was like, I want something more in life. I want to help people more. And I really sat with that for a while. I didn't really know how it was going to show up in my life. And I didn't really know how I was going to get there or what it was going to manifest into. I just knew that was the direction I wanted to go in, is to help people in some way more than what I was doing. And my therapist helped me so much, right? Changed my life, literally changed my life. She was unbelievably amazing. And it actually came up the opportunity for me to do a degree in counselling. So I went in for an interview to do a degree in counselling. And as I sat in the interview, the person said to me, she said, you're going to learn a lot about yourself and how to help other people, and loads about personal development and reflecting. And it's going to be an amazing journey. And I was like, I'm already doing that now. Like, I love that. I've been in therapy for ages. I've been reading loads of books. I've been studying personal development. Like, I'd love to do this for another 3 years. Why not? So I really thought I enjoyed, yes, I'm going to get to help people, but I enjoyed who I'd become in the process of learning this information and doing a degree and discovering all of that about human psychology and why did mum drink? Why did she do all this stuff? And learning all of that. So I just decided, okay, I'm going to go for it. And I just decided to sign up for the degree and started a 3-year journey. I didn't consider myself an academic in any way. I got sort of very low grades in school. I didn't really like the idea of degrees, but it just seemed like such an amazing journey to go on. And that's kind of where it started to sort of unfold. And I ended up selling my web design and marketing company to my friend. And I went and worked in some rehabs. And I went and worked in care and did my degree. And then as I came towards the end of my degree, I started this company and started counselling people. I already had that entrepreneurial flame. I knew I didn't want to kind of just be a counsellor. I wanted to blend all these parts of me and really make money so that I could provide more value to the world. I thought the more money I have, the more resources I have, the more reach I can have, the more people I can help. And I just felt like I had that skill set instilled in me from a very early age. So that's when I just knew I was always going to work in addiction. I was always going to start a company, and I just loved developing these skills of a counsellor. So it all just kind of tied together, and I just, the rest is history, really.
That's amazing. Same here as far as the personal development. I feel like I've read almost every book, but you named one that I haven't heard of. So there's always another book to read, right? It's amazing. This is why I started. I have to share this. This is why I'm doing this. I love hearing these stories of people taking traumatic events or the worst thing that's happened in their lives and literally taking that event and flipping it over on its head and making it their purpose in life and making it such a beautiful thing. You had such a terrible, traumatic thing happen to you with your mom. And you took that, and as you grow up with a couple older brothers as well, you start going down the path, which is probably just, a layup, right? I mean, that's, if everyone looked at us, I'd say when we were younger, like it was a lock where we were going to go in the path we were on. But you had that moment, you had a few moments, and you made that phone call. It was the last phone call in your phone that you didn't want to make, and here you are now making your life's journey is helping people, and it's a thriving business. It's fantastic. Congratulations to you on it. You mentioned you have videos as well, right? So I imagine you have in-person patients at your place, but can people find you online as well? Is there an online component to your business?
Definitely. So the way things work now is, over the past sort of 6 years, I've obviously learned a lot about addiction myself, being a guinea pig firsthand experience. I've also seen hundreds of clients and delivered over 3,000 hours of counselling and counting to clients, and worked in loads of rehabs around the UK, learning from some of the most well-respected addiction counsellors in the industry. Now, what all of this experience kind of gave me was a really unique perspective on the industry. And that's why over the past couple of years, I took a step back and really mapped out all of the things I'd learned, all of the things I was learning about clients and assessments, and really used first principle thinking to custom build my own program from everything I'd kind of come across in my own experience. And this program is an 8-week program that I built, that I take clients through, and there's 4 different components to it. So they get the videos, so they get 29 videos to watch, so they can watch at the comfort of their own home. And I've made them about 10 minutes long, so they're concise and easy to consume. And then they get a bunch of worksheets. So they get 14 worksheets to complete, where they go through loads of tools and tactics to really help them implement all of the tools step by step. Then they also get the one-to-one counselling sessions with me or one of our expert trained therapists, which is really important. So they can have that one-to-one support via online video call. And then lastly, they get accountability phone calls. So if they need anything in between sessions, sometimes you'll have a session with a counsellor on like a Tuesday, for example. Then on Friday, you're like, I've got this work drink, so I'm really having a craving. What do I do now? I don't have counselling until Tuesday again. So what do you do in those times? So we also offer support the best we can to clients in between sessions if they need a phone call for 10, 15 minutes to help them. And having those 4 levels of sports really helps them stay on track. So that's the main sort of core offer that we have at the moment that helps clients. Having that sort of 4-pillared approach helps them really integrate the change into their life so they can really get things back on track without having to take time out to go to rehab, and they can just integrate the change as they go, you know, whether that's around work meetings or whatever's going on.
That's wonderful. 8-week program. And where's the website? Where can we all find you?
Yeah, so the best place to go is insideaddiction.co.uk. And one of the things you'll find on there, and the audience will find on there, is a custom built an assessment tool. Now, what this does is that this puts clients on a continuum, which is really important. So sometimes I feel like in the addiction industry, it can be like you're an addict or you're not, or you're an alcoholic or you're not. And I think a lot of the clients I work with, it's not so simple. They're kind of wondering, you know, where they kind of fall. So I sat back and built this continuum. Now, on the far right, you have a dependent drinker. Now, a dependent drinker is someone that's drinking loads of alcohol every single day. They're physically dependent on alcohol, and it would be dangerous for them to stop. They need a medical detox, preferably in a rehab, or they need to reduce down before they stop. It's unsafe for them to stop straight away. But only some people get to that level. I mean, everyone, if they don't stop using, will eventually get there. But a lot of people aren't at that level yet. So the next level up is what I call a daily drinker. And that's someone who drinks every single day, but not with such high volumes as a dependent drinker. So maybe that's like a bottle of wine or a few beers a day. They're not drinking vodka in the morning. They're not drinking to stop the shakes, but they are drinking every single day and finding it challenging. And then the next level up, Gary, is we have the weekend drinker. And that's someone who drinks every single week, but not necessarily every single day. So maybe it's at the weekend from Thursday through to sort of Monday or Tuesday, or a few days in the week. So they drink every single week without fail, but not every day. And I'd say that person's a weekend drinker. And then we have a binge drinker. So this is someone who may go 3 or 4 weeks without drinking, but when they do drink, they really press the fucking button. They go on a massive binge, and it could be multiple days in a row till they throw up or black out, and they really just kind of go to town. And that's why I class as a binge drinker. And then, of course, you have like a non-drinker or someone who's sober, like you and I, for example. So really placing people on this continuum really helps them understand where they are, that they're not a dependent drinker, but they do need help. It is a problem in their life, and they do need that level of support, which is really, really important. So if the client and the people listening go to the website, they can really be placed on the continuum, understand where they fall on it. And it'll also tell them different areas of their life. So their subconscious programming, how much is that having an impact? Their social life, how much is that having an impact? And it will score them on different areas of their life so they can see what's impacting their drinking and what level they're at. So that's a really, really good starting point for anyone who's sitting there thinking, do I drink too much? How much do I drink? And they can really go to that tool. And the link for that is just insideaddiction.co.uk/why. And they can kind of go and discover a bit about why they're drinking. But they're the sort of main places for them to go to find out about the sort of work that I do and to work with me.
It's amazing. You know, all those, you mentioned sort of the entire progression of where you are, the entire progression of alcoholism. Like, so as you were saying them all, I checked every single one of those boxes. You know, you start one place and you get to the end, right? Which, well, the end, we all know what the real end could be, right? It's institutions at best, right? Where we go. But let me ask you, is there sort of like a graduating process? Like they come into those where they are, right? And I come and I fill out the assessment. Like, do they graduate to like a lower tier? Like, is there sort of like a gamification to it, if you will? I doubt there is, but I'm just thinking along as you were saying, like, okay, I came here and I was the daily drinker, right? And now I'm not that much of a daily drinker. I'm still drinking way too much, but at least they're seeing some progress. Is there? I guess what I'm asking is, how do you share the progress that they're making?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important thing, and especially in the addiction industry in general, sometimes it can feel like, okay, drinking loads, and then I stop drinking, and then I have one drink and I've failed and I'm a failure. I'm back to square one. I have to start counting again, and it's all over. And I might as well just not start trying again. It can take ages to get back into recovery, and it can be this big cycle. So one of the things in terms of like a slip or a relapse, it's important to remember, and that I show clients on the continuum, is you're right. So maybe they came in as a daily drinker, and they, in the first couple of weeks, they got down from drinking every single day, and now they've just had 2 days when they were drinking that week. So they've tried to be sober, they've gone a period of time, but that week they drank 2 days. They may come into me and be like, Luke, I failed, I drank 2 days. And I go, no, John, you didn't fail. You've moved along the continuum. You were a daily drinker when we first started. Now you're just a weekend drinker. You've done really, really well, right? You've done really well. You haven't failed. You haven't relapsed. You don't have to quit. You don't have to never have another session again and just be drinking for the rest of your life till you die. You've made progress. You've done well. So now let's stop again. You're now a weekend drinker. You drank 2 days this week. Let's start afresh the next week. Let's not drink again. Then maybe he goes 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then he relapses again or has a slip again. Then he's in the binge drinker, and you're like, no, John, you've done well. Don't give up. It's absolutely fine. You did drink. And the thing is also to mention, Gary, is that there'll be different events, right? So every day, maybe like a stressful day at work, there was triggering him, John to make him drink. Now with the weekend, it was like a party or a big occasion or something that happened, and someone offered him a drink and he just slipped. It was a left field moment. Wasn't the same stress that was being caused and the same trigger as daily drinking. Now it's something else, a weekend drinking. And then the binge drinking, maybe it was a few weeks, he got past a few parties, he's not getting triggered by the same level of stuff. Now he got triggered by something even bigger. Maybe that was like a really big thing at work, or some really big occasion, or a wedding or a stag do or something like that. And he slipped from that. So then he needs to learn to get through those things. And it's more of a progression mentality of slowly learning to emotionally deal with certain things, like weight on a bench press. You're dealing with the weight on the bar of life, getting through those emotional events and not relapsing at them until eventually the last time just is your last time. Like I've been through loads of events now in the past 7 years that could have tripped me up, and they've all been different weights on the bar. There's definitely been challenges, whether that's breakups or whatever it may be, that could have made me slip and trip up. But I've now got through them. I'm used to that weight on the bar. Yes, I need to keep training and doing all the tools I spoke about earlier in the episode. I definitely keep on top of my self-care and my routine and my program, but I can confidently lift those weights on the bar without relapsing. And I think that's the important thing, is teaching people is more of a progression rather than black or white. You're either sober or you're just an alcoholic and you failed and the whole world is shit.
Sure. That's very interesting to me. It really is. I totally understand the positive affirmations and anything's better, right? And I have learned in my days, and I mentioned earlier, like I got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. But that does not mean by any stretch that that's the only way. I am a big proponent and fan of, I don't care how you do it, but stop, because I used to have this sort of love affair as well as with alcohol early on, and then it was a battle. And today I'm sitting here 17 plus years sober, and I despise it, because it's a killer and I hate it. And so any way that people can learn that they don't have to live that way, and that everything that is being fed to us, commercially and in the media or what have you, marketing wise, is just so off and it's so wrong. And it's kind of new for me, but it's just, going down this path too, like this whole new alcohol free, healthy way. I'm just loving it. It doesn't matter. You don't necessarily like that community, right? Like you don't have to have a problem, right? But they realize how awful alcohol is. It does absolutely nothing. It destroys your body, destroys your mind. But just to lay off the booze all around is, it's a positive thing. So, I know so many people that have come in the rooms, and I'll speak for myself as well. Like I do have one very strong fear, and that's, I don't know if I have another, comeback in me. Like if I go back out, Luke, I am terrified I am not going to make it back into that room. I'm terrified of going in and saying, I'm Gary and it's day one. Maybe I will, but maybe I won't. And so that's, I think, a healthy fear that, and you mentioned it too, like your whole purpose, you have a little more on the line now. I have a family now, I have 2 little kids, and, they've never seen their dad drunk. If they even saw this man with 1 beer in his system, their lives would be immediately altered. Even if I didn't act out, or they would sense it, it would be their lives would be immediately altered. I know that for sure. But I want to ask you too about your program. Is there an age group that kind of dominates, or is the majority of your clients?
Yeah, so I'd say like anyone who's generally an adult, so like 18 plus. But the main kind of age group, such a big range, anywhere between sort of like 20, 25 to sort of like 40, 50. But I've worked with clients who have been in their like 70s and 80s, and I have worked with teens as well. So it's really hard to say a rough kind of age group in general, but it's generally a lot of professionals who work in London, or entrepreneurs, so C-suite executives, entrepreneurs who are running a business or running a big team, and who have a lot of responsibility and pressure in their job, and are using kind of drink and drugs to sort of soothe their emotions and manage the stress. They're typically the sort of clients that I work with on a daily basis, men and women in those kind of positions.
Yeah, that's, I was hoping you were going to say, and you kind of did, right? Because when I see younger people in the rooms, and I'll even joke, my son, he's 8 years old, and he had found out about, he didn't know my story, but he knows that I just recently had an anniversary, and that dad doesn't drink. And so he came to me and he said, Dad, just want you to know, like, I'm never going to touch alcohol. And I said, buddy, you have no idea how ahead of the game you will be if you do that, and that's such a different mindset too from how I grew up. Like, hey, how old are you? Give me a time to have a beer with me, with my dad, and they didn't mean anything by it. It was just a different time, but that is, and my wife likes to tell me, and we'll talk about this more in your show, but that I broke that mold, like as far as, generational alcoholism, if you will, I've broken it, and don't get me wrong. My next round of fears is that my kids, understand how dangerous it is, and they don't live their lives that way. And I hope they never get, to where I am, for sure. And hopefully, this podcast will help them in a roundabout way too. Yeah. But when I see young people in the meetings and in the rooms, I am so admiring them. And, I was 26 years old the first time I went to an AA meeting, and I thought that was really young. And I was 31 years old the last time I ever had a drink or a drug. And I think that's young. But I go in meetings now and I see these young men and women, like really young, 18, 19, early 20s. I'm just like, you guys are so ahead of the game. And I just think that's beautiful. And I understand too, as you said, the executives or the, the men and women in their 40s and 50s, the C-suites, as you said, they need a place as well. So feels like your purpose and your business is really a really beautiful thing. And you marry that helping people with making a living, I think I don't think there's anything better than that.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think one thing you're doing, Gary, that's amazing is leading by example, right? You're leading by example to your kids, and they're seeing you, rather than being passed out in the kitchen, they're seeing you celebrate an anniversary of your sober time. Like, how amazing is that? That's what they're growing up and seeing. So yeah, that's truly amazing.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing. We're blessed. We really are blessed. So I think we're going to wrap this up. You've been absolutely amazing, again. And, I mentioned at the beginning, or even off camera, how we get to meet amazing people. I'd really make sure that you and I stay in touch, and it's developing relationships for me. Like, this is great that we're doing this podcast, but it's really important to me that I continue to follow you, and we continue to stay in touch. And, we're across the pond, as they say, but we're on the same team, Luke.
Yeah, no, awesome. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Gary. And yeah, thanks very much for having me on the show.
And don't forget, everyone out there, insideaddiction.co.uk. Go there. Luke can help you. As you can see, he's a wonderful man. So thanks so much again for coming on, Luke. I appreciate it. And on the flip side, we're going to hang up here pretty soon. I'm going to see you again. And you're going to be in the captain's chair.
Yeah, perfect.
All right, mate. Great to talk to you, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Cheers, Gary.
Cheers.
Thank you for tuning in to another powerful episode of the Begin Again podcast. We sincerely appreciate your time and support. We hope that today's conversation has ignited a spark within you, affirming that recovery is not only attainable, but can also be a wellspring of strength and resilience. Our ultimate goal is to make a difference in someone's life every single day. By sharing these stories of redemption, we strive to empower you and inspire you to unlock your fullest potential, facilitate positive transformations, and contribute to creating a better future for yourself, for your loved ones, and the world at large. If you know someone who could benefit from listening to our show, please share it with them. And if you resonate with our mission and feel compelled to do so, we would greatly appreciate your support through a 5-star review, following us on Instagram, and subscribing to our YouTube channel, The Begin Again Podcast. The more positive reviews we receive and the wider our message spreads, the greater our collective ability to help others realize that change is possible in their own lives. Thank you once again for being a part of our community. May you be blessed on your own journey of personal growth and transformation.